major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Palestinian officials have told reporters that the truce in the Gaza Strip has been postponed due to last-minute discussions on the names of the Israeli hostages and the terms of their handover to a third party. Dozens of Palestinians have been martyred and others have been injured in a series of heavy Zionist raids on the Gaza Strip, bringing the total number of martyrs to over 14,530. Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf has arrived in Equatorial Guinea to represent the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, at the 5th summit of the Group of 10 of the African Union scheduled for tomorrow, Friday. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First, dozens of Palestinians were martyred and others were injured on Wednesday night in a series of heavy Zionist raids on the Gaza Strip, violently concentrated in the south, the Palestinian news agency Wafa reported. 4 Palestinians were martyred in the bombardment of the town of Deir el-Balah in the center of the Gaza Strip. The same source added, pointing out that the house of Abu Arrous family was targeted. According to the same source, several Palestinians were martyred and injured in the Zionist occupation's bombardment of a residential flat in the Nusayrat camp in the center of the besieged enclave. The south part of the Gaza Strip is subjected to a series of violent airstrikes coinciding with artillery bombardments on the eastern areas of the city of Khan Yunis. According to the Wafa agency, the Zionist occupiers' military aircraft targeted farmland to the west and north of Khan Yunis governorate, while heavy artillery bombardment continued in the eastern regions of the governorate. It added that a violent belt of fire had been launched by the war machine to the southwest of Khan Yunis and the Al-Qarara region in the east. More than 530 people have been martyred in the Gaza Strip, and 35,000 have been injured as a result of the Zionist despicable aggression on the Gaza Strip since October 7. A Palestinian official told reporters today that the truce in the Gaza Strip had been postponed due to last-minute discussions on the names of the Zionist hostages and the terms of their handover to a third party. He said that Qatar, in coordination with Egyptians and Americans, should announce in the coming hours today the time at which the truce will begin. The Zionist occupation authorities, for their part, announced that the agreement providing for the release of 50 hostages in exchange for 150 Palestinian prisoners will not come into force until Friday, against a backdrop of continued aggression in the Gaza Strip. And the representative of the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas in Algeria, Youssef Ramdan, has said that the agreement on a humanitarian truce in the Gaza Strip reached between the Palestinian resistance and the Zionist entity confirms the inability of the Zionist occupation to put an end to the movement and remove it from the Palestinian scene and to free the hostages by military force. More details with our colleague Saad Bougazi.
In a statement to APS, the representative of the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas in Algeria said that the humanitarian truce provides for the cessation of aggression against the Palestinian people and the definition of details concerning air traffic and the movement of civilians, in addition to the agreement on the opening of crossings and the entry of humanitarian aid. It also includes a limited exchange of civilian prisoners, including women and children, from both sides in stages. We in Hamas affirm that the political implications of this agreement, as well as all the efforts made recently to reach an agreement, confirm the failure of all the occupation's attempts to put an end to the movement and remove it from the Palestinian scene as a political and military force, and that its massacres have not weakened the resistance fighters, he added. He said all the political and military objectives that the occupation claimed to achieve through this aggression have failed, as have the plans for a political settlement and the forced displacement of the Palestinian people, which have also failed. all the allegations it had previously made concerning the release of civilian prisoners and soldiers in the hands of the resistance by military force have proved to be false. Hailing the resistance of the Palestinian people, Youssef Hamdan said that this occupation has no place in our land, and we will continue the struggle in all its diplomatic forms with our hands on the trigger. Our conscience will not rest until we see Al-Quds liberated. According to the same speaker, the priority of Hamas today is to stop the Zionist aggression against the civilians in Gaza, to open the crossings, and to bring aid to the people affected in the besieged area, particularly the entry of fuel for hospitals, aid, medical supplies, and civil protection teams to try to save what can be saved from the humanitarian disaster in the Gaza sector.
And the Secretary General of the Arab League, Ahmed Abul Ghaid, has welcomed the agreement on a humanitarian truce reached between the Palestinian resistance and the Zionist entity, hoping that the truce will lead to a comprehensive ceasefire in the besieged enclave and an end to the brutal Zionist aggression against its civilian population. The Secretary General congratulated Egypt and Qatar for their mediation efforts, which led to the truce reached early on Wednesday. The agreement includes the exchange of prisoners from the Zionist entity in the Gaza Strip in exchange for the release of a number of Palestinian women and children held in occupation jails. The Zionist entity will also allow more humanitarian aid to enter into Gaza, according to the agreement. The permanent representative of the State of Palestine to the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, has said that the humanitarian truce provided for in the agreement between the Palestinian resistance movement and the Zionist entity cannot just be a pause, calling for these few days to be used to prevent the resumption of the Zionist aggression. Said Bougazi has more again.
Hundreds of Palestinian children are not going to be killed thanks to the truce. We owe it to them and to all the civilians of the Gaza Strip to put a definitive end to this criminal attack against the Palestinian people, said Palestinian Ambassador Riyad Mansour at a meeting of the United Nations Security Council. Thanking Qatar and Egypt for their fruitful contribution, Riyad Mansour called on all those who had contributed to the agreement to find a way to prevent the resumption of the Zionist aggression against the defenseless Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip. This cannot just be a pause before the massacre resumes, he insisted again, denouncing at the same time the occupation and racial discrimination on the part of the Zionist entity against the Palestinians, which he described as apartheid. In a few days, families will be able to hug each other, mourn, and begin to heal any wounds that may have been caused, including families who will be reunited with loved ones held prisoner, he noted. Reiterating that there was no military solution to this conflict, he called for respect for the inalienable rights of the Palestinians and against attacks on all civilians.
The head of the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, told the Security Council on Wednesday that the Gaza Strip, which is subjected to a blockade and barbaric Zionist attacks, is now the most dangerous place in the world for a child, saying that humanitarian pauses are not enough to stop this carnage. Referring to the figure of 5,300 Palestinian children martyred in Gaza in 46 days of aggression, Catherine Russell said that 115 children a day, every day for weeks are killed. She deplored this unprecedented toll, to which must be added the risk of epidemics and the massive increase in malnutrition. The heads of 3 UN agencies told the Security Council on Wednesday of tragic accounts in occupied Palestine, notably the plight of pregnant women and children in Gaza who have been the victims of Zionist crimes and aggressions for the past 48 days. At a meeting on the humanitarian impact of the Zionist aggression on women and children, the leaders of UN Women, Sima Sami Bahous of the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, Catherine Russell, and of the United Nations Population Fund, Natalia Kanem, deplored the fate of some 5,500 or so pregnant women in the Palestinian enclave who are due to give birth soon. Some pregnant women have had to undergo cesarean sections without anesthetic in Gaza. Mr. Kanim reported, noting that every day around 180 women gave birth in difficult conditions, with 15% of them facing obstetric complications, adding that very limited access to emergency health and obstetric care puts their lives in danger. The Secretary General of the International Federation for Journalists, Anthony Belangi, has said that the Federation is fully behind Palestinian journalists and their union, stating that several actions have been taken with international institutions to make them aware of the suffering of Palestinian journalists. At a meeting held on Wednesday at the headquarters of the Palestinian Journalists Union in Ramallah, Anthony Belangi said that contacts had been made with UNESCO and that several meetings had taken place with its executives to discuss ways of dealing with the Zionist entities' attacks. Palestinian government spokesman Ibrahim Alem has said that the Zionist entity wants, through its continued aggression against the Gaza Strip, to turn the Palestinian enclave into an unlivable zone. Speaking at a press conference after an emergency meeting of the government, Ibrahim Alem said that what is happening in Gaza is an extension of the aggression carried out by the Zionist entity for years against the West Bank and the occupied city of Al-Quds. Going back to Algeria, where the chairman of the National People's Assembly, Ibrahim Boughali, represents today the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, at the inauguration ceremony of the President-elect of the Republic of Ecuador, Daniel Nauba, said a press release from the lower house of Parliament. The inauguration ceremony will take place in the capital, Quito, in the presence of several guests, including heads of state and government and their representatives from various countries around the world, the press release concludes. Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi chaired a government meeting on Wednesday during which several sectors, including justice, economic property, labor, entrepreneurship, and fisheries, were examined, according to a press release issued by the Prime Minister's office. At the start of the meeting, the Prime Minister recalled the high directives and instructions given by the President of the Republic at the last meeting of the Council of Ministers held on October 14, 2023, particularly with regard to the need for the government to speed up the implementation of the decisions of the Council of Ministers, especially those of a social nature. To this end, the Prime Minister emphasized the need to set up efforts to speed up the implementation of the commitments made by the President of the Republic, stressing the fundamental importance of coordination between the various sectors and of dealing with issues according to the priorities set in this respect. Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi has received a telephone call from the Vice President and Deputy Prime Minister of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, according to a press release from the Prime Minister's office. Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan conveyed his greetings and those of his brother, the President of the United Arab Emirates, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, to the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, wishing Algeria and the Algerian people further progress and prosperity under his enlightened leadership. Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi has highlighted the far-reaching economic reforms initiated by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, at the opening of the Algerian-Turkish Economic Forum in the presence of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. In this connection, he spoke of the wide range of economic reforms launched by Algeria as part of the implementation of the program of the President of the Republic, aimed at establishing an open and diversified economic model protected by a legislative and legal framework that reassures and stimulates investment. Said Bougazi has more details.
The Prime Minister assured that this framework offers all economic players the possibility of working under equitable conditions, in addition to benefiting from the same rights and opportunities, conditions enshrined in the Investment Act promulgated in July 2022, together with its implementing regulations. This law continued. The Prime Minister constitutes an integrated legal system that enshrines freedom of investment and equality between investors without distinction between local or foreign investors, protects their investments and guarantees their right to transfer the capital invested and its income. He underlined that the new investment law enshrines the principle of legal stability, especially as no changes will be applied for a period of at least 10 years, but also reinforces the standards of transparency and digitization of procedures linked to investment activities, notably with the creation of a one-stop shop with national competence dedicated to major projects and foreign investment, recalling the measures to facilitate the the granting of land for investment projects in various fields. The Prime Minister also referred to the fundamental decision taken by the President of the Republic to abolish the 51-49 rule with the exception of certain strategic sectors in order to create a more open and attractive environment for foreign investors. In the same vein, he reviewed the far-reaching reform of the monetary and banking law designed to keep pace with economic change, which has made it possible to extend the prerogatives of the Currency and Credit Council in terms of approving commercial banks, digital banks, and the digital form, developing written means of payments, and monitoring their implementation, in addition to diversifying sources of financing, notably Islamic financing. The Prime Minister affirmed that Algeria hopes to see Turkish investors contribute to the achievement of a fruitful economic partnership with their Algerian counterparts and to achieve an economic model based on diversification, the achievement of common interests, and mutually beneficial cooperation in order to meet the common aspirations of the two presidents with the aim of raising bilateral cooperation relations to the level of the exemplary and privileged relations between Algeria and Turkey, given their immense capacities and their actual role in the world economy.
And with this last piece of news, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Time now for our weekly program, the International Event of the Week, by my colleague Jamal Salmani. See you and bye-bye.
The International Event of the Week.
The humanitarian situation continued to deteriorate in the Gaza Strip as fighting intensified on the sixth week of the Israeli army operations on the Palestinian enclave. According to Médecins Sans Frontières, thousands of people remain trapped in El Shifa Hospital, one of Gaza's main hospitals, as fighting intensified in the nearby areas. It described the situation inside the hospital as critical, saying that at least 179 corpses, including babies who died on account of power shortages, were buried in a mass grave digged inside the hospital site. The World Health Organization (WHO) said that 36 health facilities, including 22 hospitals, have been damaged since the Israeli army launched its operations on Gaza. Asked if the concerns raised by the UN and by NGOs about the increasing number of casualties due to the lack of food, water and power that caused most of Gaza's hospitals to be out of action could force the Israeli government to reconsider its military action in Gaza, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi had this to say.
That is certainly an option that the Israelis are faced with. But Benjamin Netanyahu has too much at stake to relent to this pressure. As he did in a recent media gathering, he continues to justify these atrocities as necessary to protect Israel's national security. His challenge, however, is that this narrative is no longer accepted not just by the international community, but more so by the Israelis themselves and several Jewish communities in the world. In addition, the resilience of the Palestinian national resistance movement and international outrage have revived a long-forgotten debate in Israeli politics between those who seize the need to distinguish between those who question Zionism as a political ideology and who condemned some of its apartheid practices, and who argue for its separation from Judaism, and those, the other group, who sees no distinction and have, since the United Nations General Assembly issued a resolution equating Zionism with racism, have been able to rally the Jewish community of all their dimensions against the United Nations General Assembly and of course the rest of the world and the Palestinians. As known, this resolution equating Zionism with racism was later withdrawn, and until this month, the Jewish communities more or less use Zionism and Judaism interchangeable, and they seem proud of being a part of those. those two. Event in Gaza, however, the massacres of women and children have caused the Israelis who are advocate for the separation to question their association, and this is causing friction among the Jewish community. Calls by Jewish demonstrators heard in demonstrations not in our name is Netanyahu's biggest fear. Netanyahu knows that his only way out of the criminal charges he's facing would be to remain in power, and thus he's taking all his time to stay where he is. As a result, silencing world opinions, driving the Palestinians to death by cutting all sources of life and inhuman bombardments become a personal matter for him. We can see easily in how Netanyahu conducts himself in conferences with the cabinet and the statement he makes to Israeli press. He's always keen on taking the credit and distancing himself the credit for successes and distancing himself from the event when there is defeat. That is to protect himself from the future. So the bottom line is that the Palestinian resilience, the defeat, its ability to defeat Israel's expansionist project, and the impact that the images that we see from Gaza are all driving Netanyahu, or an indication that Netanyahu is defeated. However, the game changer, what will force Netanyahu to stop, is the internal threat, which is growing every day with the resistance of the Palestinian struggle and the world community.
Hundreds of thousands of people continue to flee southward, forced by the airstrikes carried out by the Israeli aircraft against the northern part of the Gaza Strip. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Aid said the mass displacement continued in the Gaza Strip, estimated at over 423,000. The number of people displaced so far by the ongoing Israeli operations on Gaza. The Israeli bombardments still hamper the delivery of aid to the Palestinians who are lacking food, water, and medicine. Several countries are now considering using air and maritime options to provide aid to the population of Gaza. Asked if the Israeli occupying authorities would consent to extend the hours-long humanitarian pauses to allow in aid to Gaza, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi had the following.
I think the simple answer is they could, but they wouldn't. This is due in part to the complicity of Western powers and failure to push Israel to do the right thing. The recent Israeli position is that they would consent on a pause, but only to continue bombarding after, and to continue with their ethnic cleansing. This reality did not escape a member of the EU Parliament, or for that matter, the entire world. The EU Parliament, Holly Kearns, a social democrat from Ireland, indicated during an EU Parliament session 5 weeks ago into the carnage, noted that the EU has taken the same stand as Israel. Kearns rejected the EU position and called the EU leadership a coward, and their position is indefensible. The EU representative went even when she talked about the EU representative of foreign relations statement, she went further, asking the EU Parliament High Representative of Foreign Affairs, who called Israel for maximum restraint when a child in Gaza is killed every 10 minutes, and more than 40 journalists at the time were killed, asking him if that sounds legal, proportionate, and answering the question herself about how Europe lost its morality. This kind of position have found support in many parts of the world. And as an example, this week, Los Angeles Times became the first American newspaper to take a stand for the ceasefire. The editorial board wrote, quote, "It has become impossible to distinguish between Israel's decidedly non-surgical operation against Hamas militant in Gaza and the indiscriminate killing of Palestinian civilians. When so-called humanitarian pauses in the bombardment and ground operations are too brief to be realistically permit innocents to flee, or when there is no place for non-combatant to go that is not in line of fire, such pauses are so deficient as to be meaningless," end quote. From that perspective, the Israelis, and it is that same position that we see from many world opinion leaders and representatives and the streets in many parts of the world, it is in that context that Israel continues to violate international law, and the only thing that it could do right is by stopping the war, and that for now seems to be not their goal to do so.
This week, the Palestinian presidency spokesman, Nabil Abu Rodaina, reiterated that the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, was the only legitimate representative of the Palestinian people and had always been acknowledged as such by the resolutions endorsed so far by the UN as well as by the Arab, Muslim and non-aligned summits. He stressed that the PLO was the only national decision maker and rejected as unacceptable all attempts to cast doubt on its representation, as if it was more necessary than ever before for the Palestinian presidency to reiterate the PLO's representation of the Palestinians already acknowledged by the international community. Our political analyst Hamoud Salhi commented the issue.
In many ways, this was a response to the American position, which basically come to suggest that the Palestinian National Authority should take control of Gaza. As we know, Gaza has been under the rule of Hamas for many years. This American position, as we know, conflicts with the Israelis who oppose the Palestinian National Authority, and in the recent position, perhaps the latest, they want a new Palestinian Authority. But both, it should be noted, agree, that is the Americans and the Israelis, that the Palestinians have no say in the matter. According to Mustafa al-Barghouthi of the Palestinian Initiative, this is unacceptable because neither Netanyahu nor Biden have a mandate by the Palestinians to determine their future by them. It is accepting what they need is to accept Palestinian right to exist free and under no occupation. Biden's further claim that the leadership that will rule Gaza must be accepted by Israel. This is simply saying that both Israel and the United States want a leadership that will serve their interests. So in that context, the PNE, the Palestinian National Authority leadership statement is to state the obvious, that the PLO is the only legitimate organization to lead Palestinians. As a Palestinian observer noted, it is the responsibility of the PLO to bring the entire Palestinian leadership at this time and to unite rank with no exception, and to tell the world, as they did by this statement, that they are the legitimate representative of Palestine and nobody should speak for them. The Palestinian, from that perspective, what the PLO statement, what the Palestinian National Authority is saying, that the Palestinians have the right to decide their future, and with no one no one should intervene in their decisions. And at the same time, they want to show and to make it clear that the Israelis and the Americans have, up to this point, have adopted a position of conquer and divide. The statement suggests that that is no longer the case, and the PLO is the only legitimate organization of the Palestinians is a clear indication of that.
In a statement issued this week on the occasion of the 35th anniversary of the Palestinian Declaration of Independence, President Mahmoud Abbas recalled that the unfair and aggressive war waged by the Israeli occupying forces was a war targeting the Palestinian existence and national identity.